This is our review of Exoticca's Ecuador, Galapagos, and Amazon tour. We'll give you all the ins and outs of what we liked and didn't like. This was our first tour package we've ever done. We've taken many cruises and been to places on our own, but the Galapagos and the Amazon and Ecuador are on our bucket list, and this Exoticca trip kind of covered all those things. This was an amazing trip. Exoticca did some things really well and a few things not so well. Booking was fairly easy on their website. We selected direct flights from Orlando, Florida to Quito, Ecuador. Exoticca bought us tickets on Avianca Airlines. Our direct flight from Orlando was canceled and rebooked with a 1-hour layover in Bogota, Colombia. The only problem with this is they never conveyed this to us. We found out when we were purchasing our checked bags through Avianca. We were also supposed to have carry-on luggage, but the airline confirmed we did not. We saw in reviews that other people had similar problems. In the end, we opted not to bring carry-ons. Exoticca did confirm that they would reimburse us, but by that point we're several days into the trip. Day 1, September 18th, 2024. We boarded our Avianca flight around 3 p.m. and arrived in Quito around 8:30 p.m. My luggage took forever coming down the baggage claim. Mine was like second to last. We were greeted by a nice gentleman who worked for Exoticca right as you leave the airport. He escorted us to the Holiday Inn shuttle. One thing Exoticca does really well is get you from point A to point B. I was not super excited to stay in a Holiday Inn, but the Holiday Inn Quito Airport is a lovely place with an excellent restaurant. I would highly recommend it. We did have a very noisy family next door and eventually did have to change rooms, but the Holiday Inn was very accommodating. Day 2. We had a meeting with our Exoticca guide at 8 a.m. and we went over our itinerary. We met the other 2 couples we were traveling with, and then we ate breakfast and lunch at the Holiday Inn. In the afternoon, we took an optional paid excursion to the Middle of the World Museum, where you can stand in the northern and southern hemisphere at the same time. You can also perform experiments related to being on the equator. It was pretty cool. We also visited and had a tasting at Casa Agave, a distillery that makes Miske, the first drink with a designation of origin in Ecuador. It was worth the money and we had a great time. That night, again, we ate at the Holiday Inn. It's like a 15-minute Uber or taxi ride to leave the hotel and go eat. Day 3. We had to get up at 5:45 a.m. to head to the airport for our 8 a.m. flight to the Galapagos. Again, we're flying Avianca. The Exoticca guide walked us through the check-in and baggage inspection. He then waited in line for about 45 minutes to get our transit cards for our group. We upgraded our seats to premium. I would highly recommend it if you're over 6 feet or 200 pounds. These seats have a lot more legroom and no middle seat. We were told not to get off the plane when it landed in Guayaquil, but I guess the plane had some problems and we had to change planes. It was a little confusing. We landed in San Cristobal about 10:30 a.m. The airport is a runway with a small terminal building. We had to pay $200 each to enter. It did seem like they took credit cards, but they said cash only. We stayed at Katarma. The hotel was great. The hotel's artwork and architecture are all made from recycled materials and tile. It's really pretty. We walked down to the main road that runs along Shipwreck Bay. Saw all kinds of sea lions. The waterfront's really nice and there's a lot of restaurants. We ate at La Regatta. We had shrimp fajitas, nachos, and some margaritas. We went back to the hotel and swam in the pool. The water was pretty cold. We walked back to the waterfront for dinner and ate at Giuseppe's. We had zucchini pasta with shrimp and pizza, and it was excellent. Day 4, we started with a quick breakfast at the hotel and then took a 10-minute walk down to the dock to meet our tour. This tour was the half-day snorkeling on Isla Lobos, and there was an extra cost. It was well worth it. We took a 45-minute boat ride to Isla Lobos. When we got there, we got off by dinghy and did an amazing walking tour and saw so many birds and sea lions. Walking on the rocks can be pretty tough. Even our guide had problems, as you can see him here on the ground. If you're not in shape or stable on your feet, you might want to skip this tour. The dinghy picked us up and we reboarded the boat. Now it was time to snorkel. We brought our own snorkeling gear. We had to jump off the boat and the water was pretty cold. It took my breath away and it took me a couple minutes to catch my breath. We had a couple of amazing encounters with sea lions, then we reboarded the boat and went to another location that had a beach. We saw a giant sea turtle here. We then reboarded the boat and they fed us an Ecuadorian style lunch. It was good, and after all the calories we had burned, it was much appreciated. We got back to the hotel and had about 45 minutes until our next excursion to the Loberia beach. We got picked up by a bus and headed to La Loberia, which is about a 10-minute ride. The walk on the beach was scenic. We saw lots of marine iguanas and birds. We learned that you probably will not see a marine iguana in the water. They only spend a few minutes a day in the water eating. We snorkeled right off the beach and saw sea turtles immediately. There was also sea lions and lots of fish in the water. The snorkeling was very good. There was more sea lions on the beach than people. That night we ate at El Faro. It was very good. Day 5. In the morning we ate breakfast at the hotel and then headed out for the full-day highlands and giant tortoise excursion. We paid extra to do this tour. Our first stop was La Galapagos, a Galapagos tortoise hatchery, and we saw lots of tortoises. The guide explained a lot as we hiked around the property. Next we went to Porto Chino, which was a beautiful beach. There was more sea lions on the beach than people. There's some hiking to a couple overlooks, and this place is absolutely beautiful. Then we headed off to a coffee farm, Fontana de Dios. Sorry about my pronunciation. This place served us some incredible fruit and coffee grown on their own land. The farm was pretty and had some nice views of the Pacific Ocean. Next we climbed up El Junco Lagoon, which is a volcanic crater lake. It was very rainy and foggy and we couldn't see much. On a nice day, I bet the view was awesome. The climb was a lot of stairs and quite a hike. That night we ate at Vulcan Grill and Beer. We had a ribeye steak. It was a little tough but good, and a cheeseburger and some margaritas. We then walked around the town doing some souvenir shopping and then got some ice cream at Cafe San Cristobal. Day 6. We ate breakfast at the hotel again, and we pretty much ate breakfast the rest of the trip at the hotel, so breakfast was included. Exoticca picked us up in a taxi and took us down to the dock, where we loaded into a water taxi that took us to a speedboat ferry. The ferry ride was pretty loud. I recommend noise-canceling headphones. The ocean was pretty calm. It took less than 2 hours to get there. Pro tip, sit in the front of the water taxi and then sit in the back of the speedboat. The boat is enclosed so you don't get to see much. We were greeted by our Exoticca guide and we were transferred to the Albatross Hotel by taxi. The Albatross Hotel is very nice on the inside. The outside, not so much. The hotel is literally in a shipping yard. The staff was super friendly. The location was not really close to downtown, but is walkable and taxis are only a couple dollars. After checking in, we walked downtown and ate at La Regatta. We had chicken fajitas, quesadillas, and some margaritas. We took the taxi back to the hotel to meet up for the afternoon excursion, which was a half-day Santa Cruz Bahia tour. This was optional and we paid extra for it. We were picked up by taxi and driven downtown to the dock. We boarded a boat and headed off to see several areas and do a little snorkeling. First up, we did a hike to the shoreline, saw some more wildlife, blue-footed boobies, frigates. Then we did about a 45-minute snorkeling off the boat. We then went and saw the salt flats and did a 20-minute hike to Las Gritas. It's a crack in the earth that has formed a swimming hole with some snorkeling you can do there. There was a lot of people when we arrived. We didn't actually snorkel because there were so many people. Our guide was not real great. He had 2 groups, one English, one Spanish. He would give them an explanation in Spanish that took a couple minutes, then he would give us like a 30-second overview in English. The tour dropped us off at the dock. We had to find our own transportation. We decided to eat at TJ Galapagos. We had shrimp ceviche, caprese salad, and some pina coladas. We took a taxi back to the hotel. Day 7, we chose the optional full-day excursion to the Santa Cruz highlands. This tour sounded a lot like the highlands tour on San Cristobal, but it was very different. We stopped at a working coffee farm and saw how they make coffee and moonshine and got some samples. The moonshine and coffee were very good. We stopped at the Twin Craters. They were interesting, and it was a very short walk to see both. Next, we visited the El Chato Reserve, where we got to see giant turtles in their natural habitat. These were pretty awesome. They also had several lava tunnels you could walk through on the reserve. We ate lunch at the El Chato Reserve and it was included and it was good. At night for dinner, we walked back to town and ate at Agave Studio and had tacos. We walked along Charles Darwin Ave and did some souvenir shopping. Day 8. In the morning, we were picked up by taxi to do a transfer to the airport on Baltra Island for our flight back to Quito. This trip took over an hour and involved a taxi, a ferry, and a bus. The ferry costed a couple dollars. The bus ticket was provided by Exoticca. The airport was much bigger than the one on San Cristobal, but was still pretty small. We arrived back in Quito and went back to the Holiday Inn Airport. We ate lunch and dinner again at the hotel. Day 9. In the morning, we embarked on our tour of the Colonial Center of Quito. It was about 45 minutes to get there. We stopped at a local market and sampled a bunch of fruit. You could have also eaten there. The cost was just a few dollars. We stopped by the Basilica del Voto Nacional. It's the largest neo-Gothic basilica in the Americas. We then walked around the Plaza de la Independencia and the Palacio de Gobierno. This part of the city is very well preserved. Quito is home to 2.9 million people, and a lot of them are living in poverty. Next, we were off to the Ecuadorian highlands, crossing the Andes Mountains. The highest point of the road is over 13,000 feet. We stopped and looked at the Antisana volcano, which stands at almost 19,000 feet. When we went to leave, the bus would not start. Apparently, they had gotten bad gas, which is pretty common in Ecuador. The driver knew how to fix it, but he didn't have the right tools. A truck passing by stopped and had the right tool. This was about a 45-minute delay. We then proceeded down the mountain, stopping at an overlook of the Amazon. We arrived at the Hosquila Amazon Lodge right as it was getting dark. In the dry season, Ecuador has blackouts because their electricity is generated using hydroelectric. Pro tip, I would bring a headlamp or a flashlight. The lodge is without power from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. and from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Our whole group had dead cell phones by the time we arrived, so we couldn't use the lights on our cell phone. The hotel doesn't have any real lighting for you. They should use some solar lights or something. We did our night walk right after arriving and we saw some bugs and walked around the property. Overall, the lodge is nice. You know, you're pretty remote, so you have to eat on site. The food was good. Day 10. This day we did all 3 available tours and they were all paid. We left the lodge and drove an hour to the Isawali Monkey Village. There was a lot of capuchin monkeys climbing around in the town square. We boarded the motorized canoes and went to Pequao Lagoon. We toured the lagoon in a paddle canoe with a guide. We saw some wildlife and did a jungle hike. We then went downriver to visit the Ampupacan community of women and ate lunch. It was a good tour. We then returned to the lodge and did the jungle hike to the waterfall. The guides were great and we learned a lot about all the different plants and medicinal qualities. The hike round trip was a couple of hours and was well worth it. That night before dinner, we did the chocolate making workshop. This was educational, a lot of fun, and very tasty. Day 11. In the morning, we left for Quito, and on our way back, we stopped at the Papallacta hot springs. You have to pay an entrance fee, and it was a little more than $10. Pro tip, you can rent towels, but they are right by the entrance in a small window that's kind of hidden. The water was nice and relaxing, nice place to visit. We then made our way back to the Holiday Inn Quito Airport in the afternoon. We ate dinner. We repacked our bags because we had an early flight the next morning. Day 12, up at 5 a.m. to take the shuttle to the airport for an early morning flight to Orlando. Overall, we spent about $1,000 in cash for entry fees, tips, drinks, food, etc. Highlights of this Exoticca package. We had amazing weather. Getting from point A to point B was relatively stress-free, except for the bus breakdown and changing planes in Guayaquil. The wildlife was incredible, the hotels were good, the optional tours were worth the extra money. We would definitely recommend this trip.